Indiano, economista de formação, Pavan Sukhdev fez carreira no setor financeiro. Em 2008, resolve tirar uma licença do Deutsche Bank para liderar a iniciativa Economia Verde, encabeçada pelo Programa das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente. O relatório TEEB, The Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, que avalia os benefícios econômicos mundiais da biodiversidade, fez avançar muito o debate sobre a economia e recursos naturais, criando a contabilidade do capital natural, que adiciona o valor das riquezas naturais aos tradicionais cálculos econômicos. Em 2012, Sukhdev avançou ainda mais na análise sobre o mundo dos negócios, com o seu livro Movimento Corporação 2020. Nele, o economista defende impostos mais elevados com base no impacto ambiental, para estimular nas atividades econômicas a inovação verde. O indiano esteve no Brasil em maio de 2013 para lançar a edição brasileira de seu livro, publicado pelo selo Planeta Sustentável da editora Abril.
I'm delighted to be with all of you tonight. Such beautiful surroundings, the beautiful falls next to us, water everywhere. I got involved as a banker, as a finance person, first in measuring the value of nature services, ecosystem services, because I found it rather strange that we could not still, after 230 years after Adam Smith, tell the difference between value and price. It's not that difficult. Value is what you receive, price is what you pay. But the thing is, when it gets complicated, because value is what you receive, sometimes there is no price for that value. And nature gives a lot of value to us every day, but doesn't charge us anything. When did you last see an invoice from a bee for pollination services for May 2013? Or when did you see an invoice from these forests saying water generation service for the year 2012? That doesn't happen. So a lot of value comes without any price. We define a green economy in simple terms as an economy which can achieve human well-being, can improve social equity, which means the gap between the rich and the poor narrows. And that's not by making the rich poorer, but by making the poor richer, please note. And at the same time, you reduce ecological scarcities, like soil fertility and fresh water, which are big problems in Africa and Asia, and especially my country as well. And at the same time, you reduce environmental risks, which means the risks of climate change and pollution and chemical poisons and so on. We demonstrated using an existing model, which people were familiar with, that a green economy produces better outcomes than a brown economy. Better performance in terms of energy use per capita, better in terms of water use, better in terms of forests, even better in terms of GDP per capita over time, so long as you can invest 1 to 2% of GDP, which is basically, a 20th to a 10th of gross capital formation. Global GDP at that time was $65 trillion. Total capital formation, $13 trillion. We were asking for an investment of $1.3 trillion, which, by the way, is only slightly higher than the subsidies today which support the brown economy. So it's not about getting lots of money. It's about using the same money in a different direction. Investing here, investing there. But you will not actually achieve a change in economic direction and resource use unless you focus on the engine of the economy, and that is today's corporation. So unless each corporation is behaving like a minute part of the green economy, which means delivering public wealth at the same time as making private profits, that means not destroying natural capital at the same time as making private financial capital. That means creating human and social capital for the public at the same time as profits for the shareholder. We will not actually get the green economy that we want. And that challenge is actually quite a significant challenge because today's corporation is not designed for that. And the reason for that is historical. And it created actually the engine of this last century's economy. But it also created with it complexities, challenges, and problems. And some of those problems can be defined in terms of 4 basic characteristics. The characteristics being, one is a pursuit of size. In other words, trying to grow very fast, very far, in order to get the best volume, in order to get the best profits. And another was about the use of finance, the use of the access to finance. Use advertising as a way to create demand in consumers. Lobbying is another feature of the old corporation. One of the consequences of that is what we call negative externalities. And these negative externalities are actually quite huge and quite significant. So what are they? These are the third-party effects of doing business as usual. I make a car, I sell you a car, you buy it. I'm happy because I make a profit. You're happy because you drive it. Those are not illegalities. Me making a car is not illegal. You buying and driving it is not illegal. But there are consequences on third parties who were not involved when you and I did the deal between making and selling a car. And those externalities really have to be measured and understood, because nobody who is involved in the transaction by definition measures them. So again, these third-party effects have to be accounted for basically one reason, which is that they are so big. These third-party impacts are as much as $2 trillion for the top 3,000 companies. That's like 3.5% of global GDP. That's huge. In fact, many of these are leading to the so-called planetary boundaries. We are approaching planetary boundaries in many different dimensions. So across the whole space of ecosystems and planetary resources, we are actually risking levels where potentially you could tip the ecosystem into a different state of existence. So you could tip planetary boundaries to a point where they may not allow us to survive. So these boundaries are real. Many of them could be hit by 2020. That is why we need serious change in the direction of the economy and in the direction of resource use before 2020, which means action is required now. So in summary, the challenges are many. Now you can see the big problems that we have of excessive demand, too cheap supply, resource depletion, and public losses. Public capital as in nature largely being lost. All of them have drivers which are micro drivers. The problems are macro, but their drivers are micro, which means at the corporation level. So that's a key point that is really in my book. In fact, this slide is a one-page summary of the book. So now I'm doing myself a disservice. It means you don't have to read it, actually, if you've seen this slide. The good news part of the book is that for each of those micro drivers of the macro problems, there's actually a micro solution as well. Right? It exists. It's sitting there. Now the question is, are we going to implement it in the next 7 to 10 years or not? That's really the issue. So you can introduce ethics in advertising, and I'll give you an example in a moment. You can limit leverage. You can introduce limits to leverage. There are many ways of doing that. You can replace taxes on profits with taxes on resources. Right now we do the opposite. We tax the goods. We don't tax the bads. We tax salaries as well. We don't tax the bad. And finally, disclosing externalities, measuring them and disclosing them. That's absolutely essential, because today, whether it's corporate profit at the corporate level or GDP at the national level, those numbers don't inform. Right? So these things we don't do. We just don't do them, and that's the challenge. Externalities do not get accounted for. That's the whole point. How much fresh water, carbon, pollutants, etc., in dollar terms have come out of that product? This is the only complicated one, actually. The rest are relatively easy to do. But even the complicated one has been done by Puma. And here's an example of footprint, product footprint, in other words, the true cost of the product being actually put on the price tag of the product. So yeah, you can buy the shirt, which is biodegradable, knowing that its footprint is 2.3 euros as against the 3.4 euros of the more expensive to society shirt. Even though the price of the shirt is the same, this one costs society less than that one costs. Then you decide which shirt you like to buy. So what is it that makes the kind of corporation that we want? Not a corporation 1920, but a corporation 2020. I would like to summarize it like this, that its goals have to be aligned to society's goals. It should be aiming in the right direction, the same direction that society is aiming as well. It should be what I call a capital factory. And by that I mean that not just calculating the profits it makes, financial capital for shareholders, but also human capital, social capital, natural capital, that it either creates or destroys for people at large. So keeping an eye on not just your performance affecting your shareholders, but your performance affecting everyone outside the company. It should be an institute training employees, improving their skills, their work skills, so that in fact they become more valuable and as a result can earn more in life. It should be a community, basically treating its employees and its suppliers as a collective group of people working together towards the same goals. These are the things that actually you need in the new corporation. And then you will have a situation where its normal operations do not generate negative externalities, but positive externalities. This is the key difference in the model, in the business model of the corporation. The key difference between Corporation 1920 and Corporation 2020. But am I talking theory? Am I just dreaming? In Brazil, you have several examples, but I think Natura is a particularly good example of positive social capital being created because, as you know, they have these nature-based products, but that's not what's exciting, actually. What's exciting is how they sell it. They sell it through a model where actually housewives, their consultants, learn how to buy the product and sell it to their neighbors, their friends, their relatives, their village, the town, neighborhood, etc. And this does several things which are positive externalities. Number one, it adds income to the woman, so it creates a better balance between the man and the woman, social. Secondly, skills are given to the woman so that she can actually use the skills of creating a marketing process for her friends, relatives, for other products, not just Natura's products. Thirdly, the fact that the woman is earning, and this has been researched and found to be the case many times, if the household income is got a significant contribution from the woman, the tendency is for household expenditure to be higher on health and education. And that's obviously good for the next generation, for the children. And fourthly, all these 1.4 million housewives who are helping sell Naturas are actually labor force which is flexible. So it's adding, because they don't belong to anybody's headcount, there aren't any cost to the country of maintaining them. So they're adding labor market flexibility and labor market efficiency. And the numbers here are huge. I mean, I think the last number was something like 1 point some billion dollars of commission paid across to these 1.4 million housewives. So we're talking significant numbers of the order of $1,000 per household. That's a lot of money. So in summary, 4 things need to be done. We need to make advertising accountable, and there are ways of doing it. We need to limit leverage. There are ways of doing it. We need to de-emphasize profit taxation and emphasize resource taxation. So charge for the use of resources like atmospheric use, charge for the extraction of minerals. And finally, we need to disclose, measure and disclose externalities. These things are really important. They're really urgent. They have to be done. There are hundreds of things that people can do, but I'm asking that only 4 things need to be done. Those are the 4 which I think will create the change in direction that we need so that today's corporation can become Corporation 2020 and today's economy can become tomorrow's green economy. That's what I hope will happen, and I seek your help to make that happen. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah.